Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight, we are going to be returning to the world of police officers and the horrors that they have to endure on a daily basis. So get ready, get comfortable, and let the darkness take control. I used to be on the police force in my hometown when I was younger. This was in the early 80s. They received a call at dispatch about a little girl who just asked for help. She sounded quite distressed, but before the responder could get any further information, the line went dead. They were quite worried about the little girl. Unfortunately, they managed to track where the call had originated from, and so I was dispatched. My town was relatively small, and I think we were the closest ones to it, but it was at least a good half-hour drive. From what they told me, I was just worried that by the time I got there, she would be okay. So off I go on my merry way, trying to get to this girl as quickly as I can. It takes about 25 minutes all in all, but when I get there, I call back and check, because I'm sure they've given me the wrong address. The place is a deserted house. They tell me that it is indeed the right address, and the lady on the other end is insistent, telling me that she is 100% sure because there doesn't appear to be anything else around for miles, and she was correct on that one. I swallow my pride and accept it, knowing that this is the wrong place, but whatever. I carry on, but worry that maybe the call has been mixed up, and there's a little girl in danger somewhere who we aren't getting to. Nonetheless, I walk into the house. My heart is filled with trepidation as I slowly look around the perimeter. The back door has been left open, and I let myself in very quietly. I scan the area. The kitchen doesn't look like it's been used for the last 30 years. There are old plates still on the table, and a fridge unit, and it all seems very ominous. The house in itself isn't particularly big, and I move through the doorway into a modest dining room. I can see a newspaper on the table, and something decaying in the corner of the room. I carry on though, and call out if anyone is there. The house doesn't make a sound. I carry on into the next room to be met with nothing and silence. Just as I get to the stairs, I hear something, footfalls coming from above me. They're loud and accented, and at this point I'm certain that there's someone in the building. Shit just got real. I call out, "Police!" But there's no reply. I start making my way up the stairs. The person hasn't said anything, and I could hear running in a room on the other side on the top part of the house. I again shout, "Police!" and ask them to respond to the call, but they don't. It's silent. I'm starting to get nervous. This is the part of the job that's quite hard, as you can be in very serious danger, as you never know who's round a corner. I get to the top of the stairs and do a perimeter check, and can't hear anyone. I hadn't noticed it before, but there's stairs leading up to a third floor. I hear them. There's someone upstairs. They must have climbed the stairs. Just as I finish sweeping the last room on the second floor, I hear a soft creak from above my head. I start making my way up the narrow stairs, inching closer to the top, fear gripping me. I peek my head up and look, and it's pitch black. I go 2 steps down and turn on my flashlight. and just as I'm illuminating the 3rd floor, I see something move from the corner of my eye. It just passed my ray of light, and I move my flashlight around and around just to see what I'd missed, but can't see anything. I creep up to the very top and start searching every room thoroughly. The beds are old, the mattresses are decaying, and the whole place has a very dark feeling to it. That's the only way I can describe it. The air was old and musty, and I was beginning to feel very uncomfortable. When I got to the final room in the corner, I looked behind every door, under every bed, and inside every closet, and I found nothing. Just as I was about to leave though, my flashlight shined on the stairs, and I saw the head of someone going down. There it is. I knew someone had been toying with me. I ran to the top of the stairs and flashed my flashlight down. I caught someone in the light, and the person stopped. It was a child, no older than about 9 or 10, wearing rags as clothes. I assumed this was the person who made the call, and I said to them, "There's no need to be frightened, but just put your hands up and turn around please, and we can get all of this sorted out." The child didn't move. They stood there still. This started to scare me. They were in the dark, and so I yelled it now, this time more angrily and forceful, telling them to turn around with their hands above their head. But still, they did nothing. Just as I started going down the stairs to try and detain this person just in case, they started turning their head. Bear in mind at this point I was really freaking out hard. So I'm not sure if they turned around slowly and it was purposeful, or if I was just so tense that I was caught up in the moment and it felt slow. But nonetheless, when that head turned, it felt slow, it felt purposeful. And when their eyes met mine, a sly grin appeared on the face, and just as I took a step forward, the child was gone. I absolutely lost it. I flashed my flashlight all around and then bolted out the house. I called dispatch and told them that I had no idea where they sent me, but there was no one in that house, and asked them to double check. They said they were 100% sure and confirmed that no one was there, and left. That night, I had nightmares about that child and the creepy face I saw. I didn't even tell my girlfriend at the time. I was too spooked. Since then, I quit the force and went on to become a contractor in construction. But when I was getting together with some friends back home, one of them coincidentally had become a police officer. And as we were drinking and shooting the shit, something inside me told me it was time to let go. I trusted this guy, we'd been friends for years. So I told him the story about what happened to me that night and what I had experienced. He listened, mouth agape, and when I got to the very end of the story, he told me that he'd heard from someone else in the force that they'd also been called to a rural home, and when they got there, there was nobody there, but that they heard noises and the laughter of children, and they also left spooked. To this day I wonder if it could have been the same home. All that I know is that I have no intention of going back. I am not a police officer, but my dad was. I had a friend. His name was Brian. Now Brian was going to buy some weed from a dude a couple of blocks down from his house, a big-time dealer that sold a lot at the time. We were both 15, and he was in the passenger seat with his older friend. His older friend was driving, and I was in the back. Well, he goes into the house, only to come sprinting out with arms full of pot. The dealer stepped out of the door, aimed the gun, and 3 shots fired. I watched him collapse on the ground, and I jumped out of the car and pulled him back into his seat, where his older friend buckled his slumped body over. Another shot fired, and the driver was struck in the leg. The bags of weed fell on the ground, and we threw the rest out, rushing him to the hospital. But when we got there, his lifeless body was just slumped over in the seat, bleeding everywhere. The older driver started to cry and was brought in to treat his gunshot wound. I was left alone, questioned by everyone. He was 15 years old and one of my best friends at the time. Fast forward 2 years now, on New Year's Eve, a gunshot went off outside, triggering a sense of doom within me. I attempted suicide by opiate overdose, but my friend kicked the door down to get me to vomit somehow, and I went to the hospital. Now today, I take mood stabilizers and a cocktail of other stuff in order to combat my PTSD, depression and anxiety. I've gotten better, but the thought will never leave my mind. There is a mist when he was shot, a crimson mist that tasted and smelled of copper. I am a police officer. A couple of years ago, I get a call to service for a burglar alarm going off. In the morning, well before sunrise. I respond to the house and find an open door, but no sign of forced entry. So I begin clearing the house alone, which I know is not a great idea to do, making sure no one is inside and up to no good. I got through the clearing maybe half of the first floor, when I noticed that every photograph hanging in the room has been turned upside down. That's strange, I think to myself. I carry on checking the house and find that every picture I can find and crucifix above the door are all inverted as well. Now, I don't generally scare easily or believe in the paranormal, but in the context of the situation, combined with recently having gone to see Paranormal Activity, my inner reptile brain was screaming, nope, nope, nope. But I'm a cop, and I have a gun and a job to do, so I press on. About halfway down the stairs in the basement of the house, the power goes out. Too spooky for me, and I was out of there. I was not about to become anyone's patient, victim, ritual sacrifice, or whatever. At the very least, not alone. I had 2 other officers respond to search. We didn't find any signs of a burglar, but the rest of the house was the same, with every picture and religious fixture upside down. I don't know if it was a prank pulled or what, but certainly the creepiest thing that I have ever encountered. I went to the IRA bombing of the Royal Green Jackets Band in Regent's Park, London. I was a motorcycle officer, and as I walked onto the scene, it was like a charnel house. The big brave terrorist placed the bomb in the base of the bandstand. When it ignited, the blast hit the concrete cupola roof and blew down and out and decimated the band, blowing their bodies everywhere. Everyone was trying to do their best for the casualties. Nearest to me was a soldier who was missing both legs, both blown off above the knee. As I was trying my damnedest to stop the flow of blood, I thought I felt it was raining. I ignored it and carried on, dealing with the casualties, I look up, and the rain was blood, coming from a corpse in the tree, and the blood was dripping all over me. At the end of my shift, I went and stood under the shower, wearing my uniform, kit and all, and stayed there until all the blood was washed off. I cleaned my boots the next day, and found brains all over the sole. That was not a good day. I got a call about a domestic dispute, so I go into it expecting what every officer does. I arrive, knock, and get no answer but can hear crying. I look into the window and see a woman laying on the floor in a pool of blood. I immediately call in a 10:54, possible dead body, and wait for backup as they were about a minute out. Myself and 2 other officers enter the house. This scene that I saw that day is something that is permanently etched into my brain. Mother had been stabbed several times and her throat had been slit. The father was found in the sister's room slumped over the daughter's bed, dead, also stabbed several times. The daughter, who of all was 12, was in the middle of the room naked, and appeared to have just been raped and had a single puncture wound to the left temple. We found the son, who was 16 at the time, hiding in the closet, covered in blood. His eyes had the coldest evil look to them. I don't even know how to explain it. It turned out he murdered his family and raped his little sister, all because his mom wouldn't let him go out with his friends. It doesn't make me feel any better knowing he got life in prison. Any officer will tell you that any time you come across a scene like that, it takes a little bit of your life with you. I joined the military at 18 and became a cop. The very first night of shift, within the first 30 minutes, we got a call of a baby not breathing. I was with my supervisor at the time when the call came in. He put his foot down and didn't let up until we made it to the address. As soon as I ran into the residence, the mum was screaming hysterically, holding the baby, yelling, "Please save him," over and over. I was fresh out of boot and tech school and freshly spun up on CPR. I grabbed the baby and started CPR, knowing the whole time I performed it, there was no way I was going to bring this child back from the beyond. I could tell he had been gone for quite some time, and even if I did bring him back, it wouldn't matter, because the brain had been without oxygen for far too long. I kept performing CPR until the paramedics arrived. When the paramedics ran in, about 10 minutes later, they gave me the "he's gone" look, but they knew why I was trying. The poor mother and father were a mess, praying on the floor behind me for a miracle. The paramedics took over, taking the baby with them to the waiting ambulance with the parents in tow. After the ambulance departed the scene with the baby and the parents, I remember standing on the front lawn with my supervisor and just staring at the night sky, smoking a cigarette, wondering just how the hell I was going to get through the rest of the night without bawling in front of everyone else. Somehow, I remained stoic the rest of the night, but killed 2 packs of cigarettes. Not much else was said that night, except during our report, and even then, little needed to be said. We found out later the baby had died of sudden infant death syndrome, and there isn't anything I could have done to save him, or anyone for that matter. This did comfort me a bit, but it was still a horrible experience, especially at the age of 18. This was roughly 12 years ago, and I have 2 kids of my own of 5 and 2, and I worry about them constantly, especially during the SIDS stage, where they were susceptible to it, and I would wake up in a panic and sprint to their rooms to make sure that they were still breathing. My mother is a police officer, and she's had to deal with some pretty challenging stuff in her career. I used to have a friend called Susie. I met her when I was really young, and we always used to hang out at her house after school. We had a great friendship, especially when we were young little girls. The world used to seem so innocent back then. However, of course, as things change and people grow, we inevitably drifted apart. Where I became more outgoing and more sociable, she started to become a bit more introverted. We used to go to the same school, and I saw the kind of people that she'd hang out with, if she'd hang out with anyone at all. I'd be surprised that such a lovely and caring person would be sitting alone in the lunch hall. There would be times where I'd go up to her and try to strike up conversations with her, but something had changed. She just didn't want to chat that much. She just wasn't interested in being my friend. Now, I don't know why the friendship collapsed, whose fault it was really. I think it was just one of these things. You make new friends, you meet different people, and slowly you naturally drift apart. Not so much anyone's fault kind of thing. But nonetheless, part of me thought that she might have been hurt, or perhaps resentful of our different friendship circles. And I wanted to mend this friendship. She'd meant so much to me in my youth, and I had become determined to make amends. So a few days later, I popped round her house, and her mother was there, and I asked to see her. She was quite shocked and surprised in a happy way, as she hadn't seen me in a long time. After our little reintroduction, I asked if Susie was about, but she said that she was out. So, reluctantly, I returned home quite disappointed. The next day at school, I tried really hard to engage in conversation with her, to sit with her and generally try and rekindle our friendship, which worked to some degree. We started hanging out little bit by little bit. I introduced her to my friends, and we all started to hang out together a bit more often. But nonetheless, she would still be shy, she would still be reclusive. And even though she was there physically, sometimes it felt like she wasn't. Like she didn't want to be there, almost as if I were obligating her. This really started to sadden me. But now, as an older person reflecting on it, I realized that it is because there was something deeply wrong. I tried harder and harder to become her friend, and one day she confided in me and told me that she self-harmed. As the weeks went by, I went further down the rabbit hole, and she told me more and more, and it had horrified me. Something that I had never noticed is that she didn't have a father. This, of course, when I was younger, wasn't really an important factor, as neither did I. But there were sometimes strange men at her house, men I didn't know. She went on to tell me, in confidence mind you, that in her early years, her mother had boyfriends, and there was one boyfriend in particular who had grown a liking to Susie. She never went into detail about the abuse she received at his hand, but whatever it was, it certainly left scars, deep scars, inside and out. She was very emotional as she was telling me this, and it was pretty clear to see that she was having a hard time trying to get it out. But I felt it therapeutic. I thought that this could help her and told her to see our counsellor at school. She didn't. But things got better. She started to be a bit more perky after managing to reveal all that to me, but at the same time, her reclusive nature didn't seem to dwindle either. My friends started then getting into a bit more mischief as we were getting older. We had a favourite hangout spot that we just recently learnt about. It was an old and abandoned little hut by the railway line. Now I'm not really sure what it was used for, but it was just big enough to fit the 6 of us. Already had a bench and a table to make it convenient for us to chill, as well as enough room for us to stand up and move around in freely. It was the perfect little hangout spot. We'd all pile into a car and drive about 10 minutes up the road, walk through a little forest pathway, and after about 8 minutes walking past the tracks, you'd get there. The door was open, and it seemed to have been used previously by other people, perhaps looking for a place to chill. But for now, we were going to call this our little hideaway. Bear in mind though, it was right next to the railway line. Very close indeed. And there'd be times when we'd hear the trains approaching where we'd all duck just in case someone was looking out the window. As we didn't want to be seen. People can call the police after all. And how embarrassing would it be for my mother to come and have to arrest her own daughter? In any case, after Susie confided in me, things were going up and then they started going down again. By this point, I tried and tried and tried hard to be her friend, but part of me thought that perhaps she just wasn't as interested as before. Again, something I know now is that I should have tried harder, and to not just give up. But being a childish teenager, this wasn't easy for me to do. In short, she and I had a falling out. It was something so mundane as well. She didn't want to come and hang out with us and do a little bit of pot in the train stop, which is what we called it. She would rather stay home and draw. Fine, but this really upset me, and I told her that she really should come and that everyone was waiting for her. And we got into a big argument. She basically saying at the end that no one who was there would ever miss her, and that they weren't really her friends. They were only nice to her because of me. It didn't end well, and I said a few things I wish I could take back. But in the heat of the moment, that's what came out. She didn't come to school the next day, and I felt really deflated and like a fool for saying what I did. I really wanted her friendship, and wanted her to be okay and for us two to have what we had back then. She didn't come to school the next day either, and I went to knock on her door, and her mother wasn't there either. I wasn't sure what was going on, so I just left it, and pretended that nothing had happened. It was a Friday, I remember that much. Our friends weren't hanging out that day. A lot of people had things they needed to do, and so I was just home alone as usual, chilling reading a book. I fall asleep on the sofa and just call it a night, waiting for my ritual of my mother to arrive in the early hours and wake me up so I can drag my sorry butt to bed. But I woke up in the morning. My mother hadn't come home. It must have been quite serious, I thought. Mum always gets home around 2 or 3, depending on the shift. But the week she was working, I knew she should have been home by this time. At about midday, she trots through, looking visibly upset. Now remember how I said Fridays we always used to hang out, but stuff had come up? Well, this is where it gets quite tragic. From what we could make out together, Susie had gone to our little hangout spot last night or last evening. She'd spent the whole evening there, and none of us had come. I don't know if she just wanted to be around people, or if she had just perhaps gone to try and reconnect with me or apologize or whatever. All that we know is that she was there. She waited for a while, went through about 5 cigarettes, and then decided it would be a jolly good idea to just lie down on the train tracks. And of course, a train came ploughing into her. By the time the conductor saw her, as it was quite late at night, it was already too late, and she, unrelenting, stayed put until it was far too late. My mother was visibly shocked, because she knew that I had been trying to reconnect with her, and I had been telling my mother all of this. So, the bit she found most difficult was telling me that she'd wanted to kill herself, as I never told her about the abuse that she suffered, just that we'd been trying to reconnect. I feel so incredibly guilty for what happened. I blame myself, and I feel so stupid for not being patient, for not being there for her, for not being a good friend. I know it isn't my fault. I know it wasn't my job to fix everything, but my God, did I feel terrible. I went on a downward spiral that year, and I completely ruined my grades. I managed to make it up the year after some serious counselling, and with the help of my mother managed to pull through. But damn, I really wasn't expecting that. After Susie died, even though she wasn't part of our friendship circle that much, to be honest, the whole thing sort of collapsed. No one wanted to hang out anymore, let alone go to the little train stop. My world was turned completely upside down, and my mother, who'd known Susie from a little girl, was actually the first person on the scene. That's something I know that she will never forget, and neither will I. Anyway, this happened years ago, and I named my first daughter Susie for obvious reasons. I wanted to share this story for 2 reasons. Number 1, to warn people. If someone's done something to you, if you've suffered abuse, talk. Don't keep it in. People are out there and people want to listen, and they want you to get better. You don't have to do this alone. And number 2, if you're a friend and you know someone's in need, do everything you can to help them. You don't know how volatile people can be. I know for some people this might seem like an unreasonable request, but not a day goes by that I wish I could take it back and tell her that everything would be okay, and to just try and understand her a little bit more. I hope that this story has helped someone, and maybe Susie's memory will live on for the better. I had a lucky break in my work once, and it happened because I noticed a pattern taking me through a paper trail of people making online payments for hotel rooms, repeat email addresses appearing on reservations with different names and credit cards from various countries. I suspected some kind of credit fraud and called the police, but they couldn't do anything, as there was no proof of a law being broken. No victim, so no crime. Eventually, a guy from the States called me one night, saying he thought we had accidentally charged his credit card. He was one of the email addresses and same IP as previous reservations. Gotcha. I let the guy check into his room, knowing he had prepaid online using a fraudulent card, and then called the police. At first, they were reluctant to handle the situation because the victim lived in the States, and I really had to persuade them to deal with it. They called the sergeant to come and take responsibility and eventually arrest the guy. About a month later, my boss filled me in on what happened with the complaint, as I put in a complaint on one particular officer with an attitude. She didn't want to deal with this whatsoever, because credit card fraud isn't a real crime. Turned out The stolen credit card details were being bought online by a paedophile gang, who were then using the stolen details to make hotel reservations in order to abuse underage girls in the rooms. I never felt so happy that I had persisted bothering the police with it. It's the ones with the kids that get you the most. 1. A woman who was a wife of a Navy member, who was also a gambler. She had 2 kids. One who was 6 months, and the other who was 2 years. The husband was deployed, and she was so into this role-playing game that she would just sit there and let the 6-month-old baby die in the crib. The 2-year-old couldn't get food on his own, and the mother found the 6-month-old dead in the crib and wrapped the body in a trash bag. The body started to decompose and smell, so she put the body in a box outside by the front door. All the time going back into her gaming. She comments online that her baby died, and her husband comes home from deployment and finally gets from her that the baby is dead and outside in a box. He talks to a superior the next day, who reports it to the police. Side note, she also did not get up from the computer to pee or poop. Use your imagination on that one. 2. I witnessed a mother lock an 8-month-old in the room and let it die. X-rays of the girl showed half of her bones had been broken and were in various stages of healing. These were all the times that stay with us and eat at us. These memories never leave you, and you can never stop thinking about how those poor children perished. One morning, we got a call to a guy's apartment about a subject refusing to leave. I arrive on the scene and speak with the caller. The meat and potatoes of the story is that he went to a gay bar the night before and hired a male prostitute. The prostitute had been high on crack cocaine, according to the caller, for quite some time. The caller woke up in the morning and the prostitute was going crazy. The caller points upstairs and says the subject is upstairs in the bathroom. I'm making my way upstairs and I hear the subject in the shower screaming about Jesus, blood of Christ, and all kinds of nonsensical shit. The shower was a tiny ass 3x3 foot cube with no tactical entryway into it. I peer into the shower and the prostitute is naked, bloody, and stomping on broken glass as he broke out the lights. He's wet and the shower was trickling water down and he was screaming. We give him several verbal commands, but it isn't going anywhere. Firemen and EMTs showed up by then, as well as a check-in officer. I suit up as best I can with rubber gloves and go on hands in. I drag him out of the shower as best I can while trying to avoid getting blood on certain areas of me. We wrestle around and eventually get him subdued. We strapped him to the stretcher and EMS took him to the hospital. That was about it. Another amusing story is about 2 nights ago I hop out of my patrol car to contact some suspicious people in a parking lot. As I get out, I hear a rip but don't think much of it. I speak to the people, determine that nothing crazy is going on, and then return to my car. I sit back down in my car and hear more of a rip. I noticed that I was walking more freely and not hindered at all. I checked. Sure enough, I had ripped the seat of my pant completely. My arse was hanging out entirely. Luckily, I had Under Armour style underwear as I walked away from the people in the car. I couldn't help but laugh the entire way back to the station as I went to change my pants. I got a noise complaint of screaming at a huge and very shitty Section 8 property. I arrived at the apartment where a young 14-year-old male raped, then beat his female 7-year-old cousin that he was babysitting while his mother was at work. There was so much blood, I knew she was dead. Then she took a breath. I carried her down to the parking lot and waited for an ambulance, telling her she was safe and to hold on. Once they arrived, I talked to the boy. He didn't care. He had zero emotions about what happened. He went to jail, and he won't get out until after he's 30. The victim and her mother moved to a different apartment in a separate building, and the victim was almost in hospital for a month. She had to have her uterus removed and had so much internal damage from the rape and beating. I saw them a few months later at the property while I was doing vehicle patrol, and the mother hugged me and started crying. The victim also hugged me and was glad I was there for her that night. I haven't seen them since. I think they've moved. I hope she's okay. I think about her all the time, but still don't understand how family can do this to one another. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. We had some pretty serious stories in this one, with some pretty good messages, I think. Always look out for the people closest to you, and always seek help if you need it. People want to help you. Anyway, if you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to drop a like and leave a comment. It really goes a long way. And I would love it if we could get 1,000 likes on this video. So just press the little like button and that would be really appreciated. I do post every night, so don't forget to subscribe and hit the little bell icon for good measure to make sure you get your nightly spooks. If there is a story that you would like to share, feel free to send it to my email or alternatively post it to my Reddit page. Either can be found in the description. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.